Welcome in. Hail to the podcast brought to you by Maize and Blue Review. We cover Michigan for the Rivals Network, which means you can find us at michigan.rivals.com. We are joining you after a football game. Michigan 1-0, 30-10 victory over Fresno State. For the fan base, what feels like a frustrating and maybe what should be familiar victory, right? We'll get into it, but I feel like we've seen these kind of games from Michigan before, but obviously the anxiety is at a different level with Texas on the horizon, week 2 matchup. So we're going to go through some of the numbers, top performers, some surprises, concerns probably, or whatever word we're going to end up using for that. And of course, all of that framed in the context of not just the win, but looking ahead to that big matchup against Texas. So I'm joined as always by Mr. Josh Henschke, our insider and publisher. Maize and Blue Review, Josh Henschke. Sir, how just quick reaction. How are you feeling today?
Fine. I'm not overly concerned. It's week 1. I don't expect perfection week 1. There's going to be stuff to take care of, and I think we've always been on the bandwagon that this week coming up is going to be the real, I guess not the initial test, but it's going to show a lot more than what we saw against Fresno State. I'll say that much.
And joining us again, as always, now that we're in football season and not talking about recruiting anymore, our guy that was up in the sky watching this game from the big house, Brock Heilig, same thing. You obviously had the view in the stadium, and then you've been able to kind of consume the reaction online. And I don't know if you've rewatched any of the game back or not, but how are you sitting here today after that win against Fresno State?
I feel good. A lot of people have pointed out online that it's very similar to how Michigan won early on last season. The season opener against East Carolina, 30-3, I believe it was last year, and obviously last 31-6 against Green, 35 against UNLV, if I remember that correctly. So not overly concerned, but there were some things that caught my eye that I'm sure we'll get into that did make me raise an eyebrow a little bit and do have me a little bit worried heading into a matchup against a top 5 team in Texas that looked really, really good yesterday. So
that is an interesting piece of all of it. I felt like the entire week was a very sloppy week 1. There's only a handful of teams I think probably feel good right now after that week 1. Georgia is definitely one of them. I think Ohio State after the second half at halftime, they weren't feeling, but Ohio State's up there. Notre Dame beats Texas A&M, which is pretty much all they have to do to start their playoff path. But Texas is one of those teams that probably feels pretty good. And yet we'll get into it more. But I don't know how many times, and I'm thinking about Ohio State games too, where it's like the teams before, one has a really good week and one you feel like maybe struggled, and then you go into it like, oh, didn't you see what happened last week? And it is irrelevant to what happens in the actual game. So again, we'll talk through it as we go through some of the numbers and our thoughts on the game here. But Josh, if you want to go ahead and talk about our friend West real quick, and then like I said, let's get into breaking down some of this Fresno stuff and talk about Texas.
Yep. As always, this show is sponsored by Wes Romberger at My Perfect Franchise. Would you like to escape corporate America for good? Maybe you'd like to start a business on the side and keep your corporate gig. Wes can help. Wes is a franchise consultant as well as a business owner and can help you find a franchise that fits your skill set, financial requirements, how much time you have to commit, and more. Franchise is a business startup and operations kit, perfect for those with general business skills but who may not have specific knowledge on starting and running a small business. His services are 100% free, and he's here to help if you have any questions about business ownership. You can reach him by phone at 512-970-7478 or see him on the web at myperfectfranchise.net/aboutwest.
Excellent. And then, all of Wes' information right in the description on the YouTube video if you missed any of it. So, all right, let's start with the story of the entire offseason was quarterback. And then, we started hearing some smoke last weekend that Davis Warren was to not be discounted. And that smoke got stronger and stronger. And we were to the point where we're like, hey, we're expecting him to start. And then obviously Sherrone confirmed that on Saturday in the press conference. After the game, he kind of confirmed some other things that we heard, which was basically, hey, they amped up the practices a little bit. Sorry, my dog's freaking out. They amped up the practices a little bit, and that was when Davis really shined and just took over the job. So we heard Alex Orji was going to play. The term was used a lot. I don't think I would say it was a lot. That first drive, he comes in very Chris Leak, Tim Tebow, Florida-esque. Orji's in the red zone. Brilliant play call. The entire defense expects him to run, and he ends up throwing the pass to a wide-open Donovan Edwards. And then after that, the usage got interesting. A lot of odd substitutions. Didn't really seem to have any rhyme or rhythm to it. Nobody getting a full series. He'd be on, he'd be off. But yeah, so I guess big picture, and I'll put up the stats here as far as Davis's game. We could talk about Warren specifically, but the QB situation going into this game against Texas. Davis Warren's the starter. Orji's going to play kind of what, I don't want to say what we expected, right? Because what we expected was they wanted Alex Orji to take this job, and in the end, he doesn't. Davis Warren does. But how do you feel about this 2 QB strategy moving forward, and then Davis Warren to a larger extent?
Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest. I hated what they did last night with the quarterbacks. I didn't like it at all. Like as you said, there was no rhyme or reason to it. There wasn't a scenario that could give a guy time to settle in and find a rhythm. You've got, it's either you got Davis Warren coming in for a series, and then all of a sudden the next series he'll get pulled for a snap and then come back. Orji may start a snap to start a series and then get pulled. I get that it's week 1, and if you're going to run a 2 quarterback system, you got to have a system where it's not so predictable. It became very apparent really quickly what they were going to do with Orji when he was out there. He had some nice runs. I mean, averaging 6.4 a clip is pretty good, but at some point you're going to face a defense who knows what's coming, and they're going to be able to stop it. So I think adding that level of mystery is fine. But if you get to that point where people figure out what you're doing, that's kind of where it gets a little concerning. I know Fresno State's head coach Tim Skipper said after the game that, when Davis Warren is in there, it looks a lot like last year, which I would say is a compliment, because obviously we saw what Michigan's offense was able to do last year under JJ, but he didn't really seem that worried about what Orji was able to do. I mean, yeah, he had a couple of runs, and again, I know it's early, but were they being intentionally vanilla and plain? I mean, that was probably the most boring play call designs, and that's obviously by design too, because of who you got next week. But I'm assuming they're going to come into this week with a plan of what to do. You didn't really walk away with too much confidence in what Orji could do in the passing game, because he turfed one pass and then one was just a little dump off to Donovan. So I didn't think Davis Warren was bad. I mean, he had one bad throw, and that was intercepted on to Fred Moore. If he kind of let him a little more, he would have had a touchdown there. But I don't think Davis Warren was bad. I just think the play calling was kind of predictably boring. There's a lot of things to draw from here, and a lot of improvements that need to be made. But obviously, if this is the product that you're going to see all year, I don't know how successful Michigan's going to be on offense, especially if the quarterback situation, I guess, if that's what you want to call it, if is as unpredictable, in terms of when they're coming in and then predictable when they're on the field, there's obviously some stuff to clean up. So we'll see. I mean, yeah, but personally, I hated what they did last night with the quarterbacks. But again, that could be by design. But yeah, I mean, there's got to be something, there's something that's got to be done there.
Yeah, Josh stole the words right out of my mouth. I could not have hated what Michigan did in terms of the quarterbacks more. Like,
Yeah.
Heading into the game, I was hopeful that one quarterback, whoever it was, I was hopeful that one quarterback was going to get to play basically the entire game, and then at the end in garbage time, if Michigan was up by a few touchdowns, you let the other one go in there and show what he can do. Or I was hopeful that they would rotate drives, like Warren would get a drive, and then Orgy would get a drive, and then just rotate that way. But I hated the way that, and Davis Warren talked about this after the game too. He talked about how him being subbed in and out like every play for Alex Orgy doesn't affect him, and it doesn't take him out of his rhythm. I can't believe that. I have to believe that's just him saying that just to cover up for.
I mean, frankly, he wouldn't know the difference.
Right.
He doesn't have another situation to compare to. So yeah,
exactly. So I thought it was. I honestly thought it was awful, and I think it was the worst thing Michigan could have done. I'm obviously not a coach. I don't know what their plan is going forward. If they plan on playing both next week against Texas, or if they plan on doing what they did again, I have no idea. But I think that was the worst possible outcome for Michigan with Texas coming up next week.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with the idea because Darren's speaking to my heart. Sorry. Talk about Charles Leclerc winning at Monza. Yeah. Oh my God. Sorry. Monza's the home of Ferrari in Italy, and you had him pull off the victory, and what a sight that was. Anyway, I don't mind getting Orgy out there. He had 5 rushes, 432 yards, broke some tackles. 3 of those 5 rushes went for first downs. Right. So I think that zone read that he does can work. And I want to see him back there with Mullings and Edwards at the same time and some creativity. The theme of the night for me is there just felt like there was no rhyme and reason to when they did it. The play calling didn't really seem to have a flow to it. I did in my stock report today, before that interception, Mullings gets an 8-yard run. Then he gets a 5-yard run on 2nd and 2, sets up the first down. Then they call a screen pass to Morris that has no chance of succeeding. Mullings runs it into a wall, 2nd and 10. Another screen pass that has no chance of succeeding. And then the very next play is the play action deep shot, which we knew they were going to call at some point. But why then? You haven't established the run to get them to bite on the play action. You haven't gotten Warren comfortable yet. And then after he got sacked, it felt like those 2 plays together really morphed what he was doing back there. Pre-snap, he was doing really well, but then he was locking into whatever he was deciding pre-snap, not going through a lot of progressions. He was getting rid of the ball so quick. Another thing I saw, 2.12 seconds was his time to throw average in a clean pocket. So that means no pressure. He's still getting rid of it. 2.12 seconds. That's too fast. You're not letting the play develop, right? 2.5 is where they talk about after that, maybe pressure starts to get in. So you'd like to see in a clean pocket, 2.5, 2.9 seconds. I know that doesn't sound like much, but on 3rd and 9, when you're giving up on the routes before they even develop and throwing it to Edwards in the flat, another half a second and Tyler Morris is open on his drag route and he gets a first down, right? And we talked about, and we'll get to this too, with the receivers. I didn't feel like anything was done to set him up for success. We've seen in previous years when the pass rush and pressure is becoming an issue, what do? Jumbo packages, 6-0 linemen, 2 tight ends in line, keeping the running back there to pick up blitzes. They were in 5-0 line a lot last night. There was the one play where he hit Loveland, where they brought in Gentry as the 6th offensive lineman, Bredesen, and I think it was Mullings both stood back and picked up blitzes. He's only got 2 options, but one of them is Colston Loveland, the best tight end in college football, wide open on an intermediate route, right? And it felt like not only did they treat it like a preseason game, they treated it like 3 preseason games because they're so used to having 3. And it was like, I don't know if they were letting depth battles happen. I don't know. It was just really funky to me. You know what I actually want to do? I'm going to skip running backs and come back to them because I just think this tells the story as well. Sorry, let me try and zoom in here. We're talking about the rotations. And if you would have told me before this game that Fred Moore and CJ Charleston were going to combine for 9 snaps, and Kendrick Bell and Peyton O'Leary were going to combine for 56, I would have told you you're crazy.
Yep.
Kendrick Bell played 5 less snaps than Samaj Morgan. And again, that's not a shot at Bell. He had the one good play. O'Leary had his drop. I said this in one of the spaces I was in earlier. Davis Warren, I believe, had life not hit him as hard as it did. Obviously, he had to beat leukemia and then COVID. He wasn't allowed to play. I think he would have been a 4-star quarterback. But the reality is he hasn't started since 2018. Used to be a walk-on, worked his way. His center was a defensive lineman until last year.
Mm-hmm.
Right? These are the things you're dealing with. You have a new starting right tackle. And the wide receivers you're giving him is a lacrosse player who walked on and a former quarterback converted to wide receiver that you have a lot of faith in because of his bloodlines, right? Again, I don't mean that as shots at anybody, but that's just reality. Play your best players for your quarterback, man.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, again, it's just part of the no rhyme or reason to this whole thing. I mean, you'd have to assume that, there's some sort of plan for Texas. But yeah, I mean, the fact that, like CJ Charleston, who got a ton of good hype coming out of camp, didn't really see much of the field. I mean,
he's arguably the most experienced receiver on the team.
Yeah, exactly. I just find it, I found it very bizarre. I think that'd be a good word for it. Bizarre of the rotations and stuff. And I think they did it a little too much. And I don't understand the rhyme or reason behind it. I mean, again, and if that carries over
now,
if
35 for Morgan, 30 for Bell, 26 for O'Leary, 6 for Charleston, 3 for Moore. Yeah. And Morris played 54, which I was actually surprised. I didn't feel like it was that high for him. I thought he was low too, but that's my miss. But anyway.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know what to, I don't know what to say here. I mean, it's just like, it was just it was boring. I mean, and probably by design, it was just, there was no consistency to anything. I mean, I don't think there's a direct reflection on what the rest of this year is going to look like. But
it can't be.
No, well, it better not be. I mean, if you're seeing this next week, then you're going to start having some real issues here. But I mean, you would have liked to have seen kind of a gradual warm up for these guys, especially the starters, who have just gone against their own guys for the better half of a month and a half now. So, I mean, I don't have an explanation for it. They won. It's all that matters. But, for some folks, I think you'd like to see something that you can kind of lean back on heading into next week, saying, okay, well, Michigan does blank, has shown it can do blank really well in this first week. How does that translate to Texas? I mean, what they do really well so far is that they shuffle guys in and out, and that's not a good thing. So, I mean, I don't know. I don't know. I got nothing for you, fellas. I got nothing.
Last night was one of the weirdest Michigan football games I think I've ever watched. And I knew something was weird right away when Peyton O'Leary ran out there and got the start. And I'm
He
pretty sure
started.
in place of Samaj Morgan.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm sitting there befuddled. Like I had no clue what was going on. And to think that Kendrick Bell got 10 times as many snaps as Fred Moore in the pregame interview that Sharon Moore did, they were asking him, I think it was NBC was asking him who's going to be the third receiver behind Tyler Morris and Samaj Morgan, and Sharon Moore lists off like 3 or 4 guys, and none of them are Fred Moore. And I was thinking to myself, okay, maybe he just forgot about Fred Moore, but I guess not, based on what happened last night. I mean, he hardly played, and it was very weird. I don't know. It was incredibly weird to me that they opted to put in guys like Peyton O'Leary and Kendrick Bell over Fred Moore, CJ Charleston, even Samaj Morgan. He didn't see the field as much as I thought he would.
Oh,
it was,
and I felt like they still kind of used
really,
him like
really
a gadget
strange
player, which was frustrating too.
Yeah,
I want him to be, and Detroit brings up O'Leary is different than Morgan though. I mean, it was clear that O'Leary and Bell were playing the X receiver. And, obviously Samaj took like 90% of his snaps in the slot, which is what we expected. That was the case with AJ Henning and Roman Wilson when he was playing the slot before. That was the expectation. But we talked a lot about Colston Loveland being the number 1 receiver on this team largely, and him playing outside more. Well, both of those things are obviously true, right? He had a huge game. I'm sure I don't lie here. 8 receptions, 87 yards, 1 touchdown, did have the 1 drop. And then, we've been talking about all offseason too, that 20% number, took 20% of his snaps on the outside last year, most for any tight ends. It was 29% in this game. And he took another 29% of his snaps in the slot, right? So Loveland's your outside receiver. So have him out there, and Tyler Morris and Samaj Morgan, right? So, and I was getting there, Dave. So just real quick. The one thing that the caveat to this, because I'm not trying to say the sky is falling. We're just talking about what was confusing. There's a few things people, I think, have lost track of. One, Fresno State is really good. That's a really, really good football team. It's a really good football program. It was good under Tedford the first time he was there. It was good when a guy named Kalen DeBoer took over. It was good when he came back, and it's going to be good under Skipper as well. It's a good program. They won 9 games last year. They're going to compete with Boise State for the Mountain West. And you know what? If they go 11-1, they might be in the playoff. They might be the G5 team, right? So that's a good squad. The 10 points that was scored by Fresno State last night, the fewest they've scored since 2019.
Yeah.
Right? Michigan, like Dave brought up, Michigan was favored to win by 21, 21.5, something like that. They won by 20. The over-under was like 44. It ended up being about 40. So look, the game didn't largely deviate too much from what Vegas expected. And we knew they would rotate and they would treat it like a preseason game and this and that. But, we're talking about the receiver rotation and how that didn't really align very much with fall camp. The running backs don't rotate. We don't see Jordan Marshall. We don't see Benjamin Hall. We'll get to defense, obviously, but a lot of rotation at corner. But then at the defensive line, we don't see Trey Pierce. We don't see Eno Etta.
Yeah, I think like Etta got like 2 or 3 snaps or something like that.
Yeah, so there just was a lot of inconsistency with some of the rotation, and that the receiver thing just was interesting, to say the least.
Look, I know we see some skies falling comments. I mean, they deserve to get kind of not torn to shreds, but they kind of deserve to get shit on, basically, the offense, because it was just so bizarre. It's not the sky is falling. It said it was just completely bizarre.
Just confusing.
Yeah,
I'm thinking from a coach's perspective. I think Davis Warren's going to be good. I don't have any issues with Warren. I thought he was put in really weird situations.
He was fine. There was nothing wrong. He had 1 bad throw, and again, this was kind of the situation that we were talking about with the quarterbacks. You've got one guy who plays it safe, which is kind of the Tuttle Warren they're basically the same type of guy, but like, and you've got one guy who ceiling might be higher, but the inconsistency is not there. And you could tell, I mean, he turfed his pass. So look, I have no issues with the quarterback play. They mostly took care of the ball. That one bad throw led to an interception, which, to Dougie's comments here, Fred Moore should have done more on that pass too. I mean, yeah, he was 3-on-1, but you got to fight for that ball. You got to play a little bit of defense too. And Sharon rightfully called it out at halftime.
But do you think that's what happened? Because something similar happened with Will, where he was on the sideline for a long time, and people were like, "Is it because of the play before? Was that not punishment, but was that like a learning lesson thing?
Maybe.
Is that why Fred Moore only played 3 snaps after that deep ball?
It could
because he got separation. He showed he can be that guy. I'm with you. Should have fought for the ball more. There's other things that happened on that pass, but just bizarre.
Yeah, the sky isn't falling, obviously, but I think it's okay to call out an offense that was bizarre last night.
Yeah,
it was just bizarre.
Brock, let's get into running backs. I'll have you go first just because cut you off there. I don't think last night was that far from something we've talked about all summer, which is you can have running back 1 and running back 1B. And I think Mullings, in terms of what Michigan does, Mullings is probably RB1 in terms of those early downs, breaking tackles, keeping you on schedule, getting the extra yards. The O-line looked a lot better in the second half. That one drive that ended up putting the game away, he gets some big runs. And guess what? Play action, they bite hard. Loveland gets open, and then Loveland does things and gets in the end zone. I'm still not concerned about Edwards because, again, back to the way they're using him. He's a senior. How many times are you going to run him into the A gap? And it's not going to work. It's just not his skill set. Now, you can't just run him outside every single play because people know that's what you're going to do too, right? You gotta have some yin and yang there. I get it. But once again, used in the passing game, his average depth of target, negative 2.5 yards. We know what Edwards can be. We know what his skill set is. They just don't use him that way, But anyway, Mullings ended up with 15 carries. I think Edwards had 11. I wouldn't be shocked if that's a similar formula moving forward.
Yeah, Khalil Mullings, in my opinion, is he's going to be the running back that on this team that gets the most carries. He is. It's no offense to Donovan Edwards, but Khalil Mullings is incredibly more consistent when it comes to running between the tackles than Donovan Edwards is. That's just plain and simple. Khalil Mullings, like you've said over and over again, Trevor, he gets 5 yards every carry, and yesterday it was 6.1, and he was just mowing people down and running hard. He was running hard too, and he doesn't go down easily like Edwards sometimes does, but he fights for yards, and I think that's what Michigan really needs in the run game. But I would advise people not to get worried about Donovan Edwards and not to lose hope, because we know and we've seen throughout Edwards' whole career, he steps up in big games. And just when you count him out, next week against Texas, he could have 15 carries for 200 yards and 2 touchdowns. You never know. And, is Edwards going to serve as more of the home run type of back this year? Probably. And is Mullings going to get more carries? I think so. I just think that's how Michigan's rushing attack is going to shape out. But Mullings looked really, really good. And he admitted that he still has some things to work on, but he looked really solid, and Edwards not as much in terms of running between the tackles.
We've been talking about Thunder and Lightning this will be the 4th year. What's wrong with Mullings being the Thunder and Edwards being the Lightning?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's nothing wrong with
He can be a 1,000-yard rusher as RB1B. He can do that.
If you're looking for consistency, you got to go with it's a what have you done for me lately type of sport, right? And Khalil has shown, at least from last week, that he's capable of picking up some hard yards. And I think you got to ride the hot hand at least early until you can at least scheme something up to where you can put Donovan in a position to be successful, or B, be more creative, I guess, which kind of goes with the same point of setting your guys up to be successful, or at least not be as vanilla. So I don't know how much of what Donovan did last night was the result of just boring play calling and boring scheme. But I mean, yeah, you got to go with the hot hand, and that's Kalel by a pretty large margin. And, I got to give credit to Fresno State's defensive line. I mean, you've got a former 5-star in there, that from USC transfer in, and they've got a couple other pretty good defensive linemen in there too. And, and part of that too is Michigan's offensive line too. I mean, you've got 5 guys there who haven't really played a whole lot of ball together or played a whole lot of ball to begin with. They've had starts, they've had experience, but that stuff takes time to gel. And you saw as the game went on, that they got better. They found a little bit of consistency. I thought Gadis kind of had a really bad start. There's this one play where he just got totally blown up.
Hold on. I worked really hard on this. I normally suck at last names. Jadis.
I think it's Goodies.
Yeah, it's Gadis.
No, the audio's on the site. Keep going. I'm going to be pissed.
Last year it said Gadis, but whatever. Anyway, find consistent. I mean, they found consistency eventually when it mattered in the fourth quarter. So there's a lot of good things there too. But
Jadis.
Oh, okay. Well,
okay.
Right.
Yeah. I was so happy to get that right because I've been calling them like good dice and crazy stuff like that. But anyway. No, the line got better in the second half. And also, too, when I was doing the stock report, I looked up last year and the year before. So in this game, they allowed 7 pressures. Guess how many pressures they allowed in 2022 and 2023 home openers? Exactly 7.
Yeah.
Evan Link, right tackle, allowed 3 pressures. I was like, ooh, is that rough? 23 and 22. Miles Hinton, Trent Jones, 3 pressures at right tackle. And the run block grades were nearly identical. So for a first game, where we've seen in the past where these guys got to gel a little bit, it was actually pretty in line with what we've seen from previous O-lines.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
There were.
Go ahead, Brock.
I would just add there were a few plays. I don't know, Trevor, if this is one of them. Is this the one where Edwards missed the pickup on the blitz?
No. So this was we're talking about Edwards being used real quick. And for people listening on audio, I apologize. I'm going to show a video. Make sure you go to YouTube, hit like and subscribe, and check out our clips. But no, this was. So Edwards is up top on the hash marks. It's 3rd and 9. I thought this play perfectly represented a lot of Michigan not setting up Warren and just the team in general for success, right? Or excuse me, he's not up top. Edwards is standing next to him, right? And he's going to run a screen. Only 5 offensive linemen in. Nobody can pick up any pressure. But look how quickly Warren goes to the check down and how open Morris and Loveland end up being. So if he would have just waited a second, he's got Morris on the drag, right? But the other part about the way they do these screens that just drives me absolutely insane. They're in zone defense.
Mm-hmm.
So when the receivers leave the flat, you've got 2 defenders still in the flat to go get him and nobody to block. So it makes absolutely no sense. And the screens to Morris, the screens to Morgan were the same thing, where it's like you're going to the short side of the field. The offensive line's not releasing to get you out in front. There's not any additional blockers, and that's stuff that I think can be fixed is why I'm not panicking at all. Like, I think that's stuff that'll get better the more Warren plays when they get the film to watch it. But
yeah. I mean, it's going to be a very unpleasant film session if they haven't had one already. I mean, it's not going to be a very good film session on offense. Defense, I mean, they'll be fine, but offense, that was not going to be a very pleasant film watch.
No, but that's fine.
Yeah, I mean,
I'd rather have that and win a game, right?
Yeah, exactly. Look, I mean, the first game last year, I remember we were talking about kind of very similar things last year in terms of, the running game was very concerning. The offensive line was struggling. I mean, yeah, here we are again. UNLV was a good team. Ended up being a pretty good team. So, no, East Carolina was the opener, but it kind of carried over into the next week. But anyway,
they weren't blowing out the non-cons last year.
Right.
And they were frustrating. A lot of Michigan's games were frustrating. That's how it's been for a while.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's a lot of programs out there that would, take away a lot of good and bad from a game, and B, doing it while winning by 20 points and basically covering the spread. I mean, they missed the spread by a point. So, I mean, like, there's a lot of, that's fine. I mean, it's fine. It's just the way they got there was a little bizarre. And you just hope that's by design, obviously, but you got to be more dynamic. I mean, you can't play this type of game and expect to beat Texas next week. You just can't.
Yeah. Well, like I brought up the 5-0 linemen, so this play real quick and then we can move into defense. This is something I would have expected, a typical Michigan play. So one of the rare times, this might have been the only time, I'd have to go back and look for sure. I haven't looked at every single play yet, but 6 offensive linemen. Andrew Gentry is in next to him as an extra left tackle. Your tight end is in line. So you've got 7 men up front. And then Bredesen is there to block as well. Mullings is in. Mullings and Bredesen end up going to blitz protection. It's a play action, which they only ran 3 play action plays. How many times did we talk about that with JJ last year? Like, that should be your bread and butter, right? But watch when they would do the play action, how hard they bite. And guess who gets open? Colston Loveland. Mm-hmm. Look, clean pocket because there's plenty of blockers. Nice delivery, first down.
Yep.
And that's Michigan's bread and butter. So why are you going 4 wide with, at one point, Max Bredesen on the outside, Kendrick Bell, Peyton O'Leary? Like, give your quarterback a chance. And again, maybe they were trying stuff out, whatever, it's fine. But it just weird. I just thought it was weird. And, again, on the defensive side, we were talking a little bit about the rotation. Will Island for a while, and you've got multiple backups in Pollard Hall, different moments like that. But overall, we can get into the nipping. I mean, the defense was fantastic last night. Again, look down on Fresno if you want. That's a really good football team. 10's the fewest points they've scored in 5 years. The pressure is what we thought it would be. Definitely on the edge in this one. Not a lot of pressure coming from the interior, but that's okay. They were doing their job every single time with Graham and Grant. One person got double teamed and the other got through because you're going to lose one-on-one battles every time. But Josh, we spent a lot of summer talking about Derek Moore versus Josiah Stewart. Moore had the initial pressure on Stewart's first sack.
Yeah.
That's a tandem, man. I don't know if it's going to be Hutchinson or Ojabo, but that's a nasty tandem. And Stewart's taking a leap, very similar to what Jalen Harrell did, where he kind of went from he was really good at one thing on the edge to now we saw him get that huge tackle for loss where he ran up right after the sacker. I can't remember which order they were, but he had 2 huge plays back to back.
Yeah.
Good in coverage. Just those 2 guys were a monster. Rayshon Benny got a sack. Good to see him healthy. And in terms of hype translating to the field, how big and fast is Jayshawn Barham?
I mean, as advertised from the size standpoint, the fact that you got a flag for just staring down a very small person is
dude took his flag.
But my God, that guy is gigantic. I mean, you didn't really know until you see him with pads on. Like, you heard all spring and summer, man, this guy's huge. He's fast. He's strong. And you look at him in action, you go, oh my God, what do you make him in a lab? Like, these guys are just, how these guys are human is unbelievable. But I mean, again, Barham as advertised, Derek Moore, Josiah Stewart as advertised, maybe even more so than advertised. I thought those 2 guys were outstanding. Really one of the many bright spots on defense, actually. But yeah, I mean, really, really encouraging to see the defense kind of continue that status quo in terms of production. I mean, to be honest, I didn't even look at the final stats from what Fresno State was doing. I was so focused on what Michigan was doing. I didn't really look at their yardage output. But yeah, I mean, 10 yards, or excuse me, 10 points for their lowest since 2019. That speaks a lot to Michigan's defense.
They only had 9 rushing yards. They
Yeah.
did have 238 passing, because especially at the end there, they were giving up some yardage. But I mean, how many times have we talked about Michigan's willingness to let you get some passing yards but not score?
Right, exactly. The bend and don't break. I mean, again, another perfect example is that was the last drive. I mean, yeah, they kind of got into a little.
That's funny. Jay Sean looks like it's bring your dad to work day.
Yeah, right. I mean,
Grown
that last
ass man.
drive is the perfect example of the bend don't break. I mean, yeah, they kind of got themselves into trouble with some penalties. I mean, they probably got like a good 45 yards worth of penalties in like 2 plays there. But again,
I
like,
know you can't touch the quarterback, but come on.
those were incredibly soft penalties. Yes, they were. I mean, obviously the Jay Sean Barham one was just the worst thing I've ever seen in my life.
Literally hilarious.
Yeah, it was horrible. But yeah, I mean, Will Johnson doing Will Johnson things. Should have had another pick earlier. Just like the bend but don't break type of defense that they had in the fourth quarter there. I mean, again, as we've been saying this whole offseason, they're going to be the great equalizer. When the offense is kind of lagging behind and trying to catch up, the defense looks like they're in midseason form, but they're not. So, which is kind of the scary part, because there is room for improvement there. I wasn't a huge fan of the cover 0 on the touchdown. I do think Jaden McBurrows was kind of out of position a little bit on that play.
Well, you could see before the play he looked confused.
Yeah. So I mean, yeah, you kind of like it's like a play calling thing, but at the same time, you'd like to see your guys. It's a little bit of it's a mix of everything. But yeah, I mean, the Don Brown comparisons, I'm so sick and tired of it. I'm over it. I thought the blitzes were well timed. I thought the disguises were well timed. Dropping the safeties in and then dropping them back once the snap called, that just confused the hell out of Fresno State's offense. I really think this game was won in the trenches defensively. It was all about the trenches. I think offensively, I think Fresno State won in the trenches in the first half, and then kind of Michigan kind of worked its way back, and had that really nice drive to end in the fourth quarter. But yeah, I mean, I have nothing bad to say about the defense. I thought obviously not perfect, but it really encouraging to see what they had. I mean, the guys that were talked about on defense stepped up and performed really well. So this is going to be, their bread and butter for a while. It's going to keep them in games, especially this upcoming one.
If we're talking about the defense as a whole, I'll start with the defensive line. I don't have much really to say other than I agree with you, Trevor. I thought it was weird that Etta and Trey Pierce didn't get a whole lot of run. Especially Etta. I mean, we've heard a lot about him in fall camp, and he had like 2 or 3 snaps, and I thought that was strange. Linebackers were great. Jimmy Rolder really impressed me. I thought he played a good game.
Yeah, call out. Jimmy Rolder had a really good game.
And we have that answer at the LB3. That was something that was a concern going into the game. So
yeah, if he can stay healthy and be able to play a full season, I think he'll be a problem. But just going back to what we were talking about earlier with rotations, there was a play where it was earlier on in the game and someone got beat on a pass, and I look up and it's Miles Pollard,
right?
And I'm thinking, no offense to Pollard, but I'm thinking, what is he doing on the field?
That was in the second quarter,
right?
In a close football game,
right? And Michigan's rotating in guys like Amir Hall. There's drives where Will Johnson simply isn't on the field, and he's not in the medical tent. He didn't go to the locker room, and he's not. It's not like he was getting looked at. He's just not on the field. And I think I heard that they were talking about that on the broadcast, how they were the announcers Noah Eagle and Todd Blackledge were, wondering the same thing. But it's just some really strange stuff from Michigan in terms of rotation in the back end as well. And something else that caught my eye was Will Johnson actually looked human on a few of those plays. He first of all, he missed the one interception earlier on that he almost jumped. He almost jumped that one route. And then he got beat on what should have been a touchdown if it was a more accurate throw from Mikey Keene.
After not being on the field for 8 snaps or whatever it was.
Right.
And then they got in the red zone and they're like, oh, I guess we should put Will back out there.
Yeah. And obviously he made up for it with the big pick 6 there at the end, which the crowd erupted. I'll tell you that. It got real loud in there. A little bit of sarcastic cheering maybe after the first 2 were called back, but
they were just waiting for a big play to be able to cheer about too.
Yeah,
seriously. I think the longest offensive play was 28 yards yesterday for both teams, 28 yards.
Yeah, there wasn't a lot of big plays. He read that beautifully, and he actually read it the play before too. And the quarterback didn't see him because he was looking the other direction. I think he was just trying to do too much because he clearly had plays dialed up and could have got 3 interceptions in that game if he wanted. But he led the game in targets. They went after him 8 times. And, it's kind of funny too, because, they were trying and Skipper, I believe, talked about this, Josh, just the different types of routes and things they were trying to throw at Will.
Yep.
And I kind of hope I wasn't the one that said this first, so I apologize, but somebody said this today. Like, I kind of hope other teams think they can do that now. You know what I mean? Like, okay, do that. When they were playing, because again, the rotations were so heavy. Jair Hill looked really good.
Yeah, he did.
There's a reason he had CB2 locked down pretty much at the start of fall camp. I thought Zeke Berry did Mikey things, right? He got the tip ball interception. When they sent him on blitzes, he got back there quickly. He was impacting the run game. Hill on that one screen pass read that beautifully and didn't make the tackle, but hit the dude hard trying to break it up and at least slowed him down. Benny came up and
he needs to add a little weight to that frame still.
Yeah,
be able to lay the boom, but
but those 3, and then obviously Makari Page has gone to another level. They've asked him to do more. He's not just a single high safety. He was in the box. He was blitzing. He made some good plays, and I saw kind of a different energy out of him. Right, he's got to be everything he was and a little bit more.
Yep.
No pun intended, but replacing Rod Moore. He's got to bring some of that. Quentin Johnson hasn't missed a beat. He looked good. Wesley Walker, when he was out there, thought he looked really good. And we know Mangum's
Amir Hall looked good too.
And Amir Hall did too. My issue was, again, with the rotations, it didn't feel like there was any consideration to the other rotations that were happening and how players might pair together or who was in or who was out. So on that cover 0 where they send 6 and 5 wide, they almost get home for one thing. But you had Jimmy Rolder, Amir Hall, and Jada McBurrows all out there on the same side of the field together. Right? So what?
Excuse me, coughing fit.
Oh, I thought you were laughing. I was like, what?
No. I tried to mute it before I coughed and I missed the button.
So I just thought, like, weird time to call it, but whatever. Again, whatever. It's just a weird thing to nitpick. But overall, I felt really good about the defense. I don't think what they did, and this is true with the offense too, I don't think what they did Saturday is going to be a consistent thing moving forward. I'm glad that mistakes were made and they can learn from them. The people I was really excited about, I continue to be really excited about. We, other than the Eddas and some of these guys we didn't get to see a ton of, TJ Guy was good when he had his moments. I think that penalty, taking the pick off the board, and then he had the weird face mask after that. You saw him on the sideline. That seemed to mess with him quite a bit.
Yeah, I don't know how you coach that. I mean, the face mask, it was like a face mask horse collar tackle that he had. I mean, obviously that's a teaching moment there in itself, but I don't know what you say to a guy after that. Like, you still want him to go after the quarterback. I don't know. I don't know what you say to a guy after a play like that. So, it's tough. I mean, for him, it'll be a bad watch. But yeah, again, you want to keep you want to see him have that confidence and keep going after the quarterback for sure.
Trying to make sure we shout out Cam Brandt. Did get out there quite a bit in that strong side role. So, he's rotating with Moore, TJ Guy rotating with Stewart, kind of as we expected. But yeah, Moore and Stewart, again, 8 pressures total, 4 each. Stewart had the 2 sacks. I think they both had 5 tackles as well.
Mm-hmm.
Moore had 4. And then Stewart had 3 tackles for loss. So they had an extra tackle for loss on top of the sack that he had.
Crazy.
So, yeah, they looked really good. So, I continue to be excited about the defense. And I think, and somebody made a point earlier up here about, when you have a really good defense and not a good offense, like see what happens. Look at Georgia and Clemson. Well, I hear you. Georgia's got both, right? Georgia's the best team in the country again, right? They have the elite defense and the offense. With Texas, look, I picked Texas, Michigan to beat Texas at the start of the year. I'm going to stick with it. That's what I'm going to end up picking. And my reason has long been the matchup. It reminds me a lot of the Washington game because, yes, they can make big plays. They can be explosive. I think you can create enough pressure. Ewers makes mistakes. You can force him into an interception or 2 in this football game, right? I think you can do enough to keep the roof on because, they lost 2 NFL receivers. Yes, they got Isaiah Bond in from Alabama, and their running backs are hurt too. So I just feel like it's going to be a lot like Washington where this defense can stuff the run. And I think Ewers is going to get he's going to get the yardage, but I think you can force enough mistakes and limit the scoring. Again, we've talked about this 30-30 rule. Can you keep Texas to 20 points, 24? The most Michigan gave up last year was 24. Ohio State and Maryland scored 24. That was the most they gave up all year. Bama only scored 20. Washington only scored 13. Right. So I still think that's the case with the defense. On the other side, again, the offense is going to have to show they can run the ball. They can sustain the drives. They can hit the passes. And Orgy's going to come in, not at weird times, right? Keep a rhythm, like take advantage of when he is out there, show some flow on the offense. And they're going to have to score 30 points. 7 of that might have to come from the defense again.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. Or at least the short field, right? The first touchdown. I mean, that was the difference in this game with Fresno State. The 2 turnovers, Michigan scores 14 points off of. 1, the short field, and 2, the pick 6. Mm-hmm. And then they didn't give up any points on their turnover. So that's the difference, right? But Vegas has moved, right? Texas is becoming a bigger favorite. I think a lot of that might just be people, again, Texas look good, Michigan look bad. I'm betting Texas.
Yeah.
Right. We'll see what happens when it gets closer. But are you more or less confident? I don't remember what you picked for the results of this game, so I apologize. But are you more or less confident? Do you think the keys to the game are changing? Where are you at with this Texas game coming up?
Yeah, I mean, hold on a minute. We got to shout out Mr. Jones here. This doesn't happen very often, but when it does, it has to.
Good Lord, what is your profile picture, though?
Yeah, yeah.
Medieval torture is bizarre.
Yeah, Mr. Jones, the profile picture, interesting choice, but thank you very much,
Mr. Jones and me.
Yeah, getting a saw between his legs. That's pretty bad. Edward needs to be used like AJ Henning with gadgets and slots. Yeah, I mean, look, there's ways to be creative, right? I refuse to believe this is what Michigan's offense is going to look like the whole year. Yeah, I don't know. It's like, I mean, there's going to be more to this as things kind of gel and get together. And obviously you don't want to show a whole lot for Texas. And I still don't think Texas really knows what they're going to get next week, which is probably by design. There's going to be times where Edwards is going to be used more as a receiver. It's just going to happen. But this constant like bashing your head up against the wall, 8 to 12 times a game is not going to work. Eventually he's going to find one and he's going to rip one for a good 50 yards. But yeah, well, it is what it is. I'll say it. The one
there it is. Yeah.
one time I'll say it. It is what it is. So anyways, back to the question at hand. I did predict Michigan to beat Texas, and I'm gonna stick with it. I'm not gonna go against what I picked just because of what we saw in 1 week. But yeah, I mean, I don't think Texas is gonna have much of a running game anyway because of just the injury riddled position group that they have. But yeah, I think I think the Washington example is a pretty good one. I mean, Washington heading into that game did have a running back, but he was kind of pretty banged up, so he was not effective. So yeah, this is a game where the defensive backs are going to have to be on point because Ewer's arm is going to be the difference maker here. He's going to win or lose this game for Texas. It's going to come down to the defense, really on both sides. We always hear about the Big 12 defenses. Obviously, they're SEC now, but they spent most of their time in the Big 12. They've made some additions. I mean, the defensive line is going to be pretty good, so a test for the offensive line. You just hope that they have a game plan for how they're going to use Orgy, and you'd hope that Davis Warren kind of learns from this film and say like, hey, you got to look 5 to 10 yards down the field, in some plays and not just worry about the check down. But I still think the defense is going to be the great equalizer in this one. I've seen nothing that gives me concern that that the defense is just going to completely fall apart. From a passing perspective. I mean, yeah, Mikey Keene did do a couple of things to beat Michigan yesterday, but overall, I think the defense kind of stood tall, and this is going to be another test for these guys. And I think, again, Stewart and Moore are going to be effective in this game. So really, when it comes down to it, I think the defense is going to. I don't expect a shootout by any means. I think if it is a shootout, that obviously leans more towards Texas, but at the same time, Michigan's offense is scoring points, so that's also a good thing. So it kind of depends on how you look at it, but yeah, I still think Michigan can win this game. Being at home, they just play so well at home. Obviously got to see a lot more than what we did on Saturday, though, for sure.
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie. My viewpoint of Michigan's chances in this game has gone down. My confidence in them being able to win this game has dropped based on what happened yesterday. But I do still think that they're able to pull it out. I just haven't until I see the defense give up more than 24 points, like you were saying, Trevor. I have to believe that the offense can do enough to get the win, even if it means Dominic Zavada kicks 6 field goals. Like,
how good was he?
He was amazing.
Fantastic.
He was incredible.
Yep.
Yeah, but I cannot pick against Michigan's defense. The only way this can go south for Michigan is if the offense goes completely cold and goes 3 and out on like multiple consecutive drives, and then you've got the defense sucking air out there and they're gassed and
Right.
they end up giving up a few big plays and letting Texas run all over them. Guys are tired. I think that's the only way this can go south for Michigan. But I do think the offense will be able to do enough with Mullings and the offensive line making that jump from week 1 to week 2. But they're going to need to figure something out in the passing game. Davis Warren, I think, is going to have to play a little bit better, and the receivers are going to have to step up. And listen, if you have to throw the ball to Colston Loveland every time, then that's what you have to do. But he was incredible yesterday, and if he's able to do that against Texas and get open at the rate that he was, then Michigan's going to need to force feed him. But anything, even just moving the ball into field goal range and kicking field goals, I don't think is bad for Michigan just because that defense is so elite. Just give them time to rest on the bench, make adjustments, and catch their breath.
Yeah, I think an interesting part of the Fresno State game, not only did we, I mean, they went up tempo at one point, but like most teams aren't trying to do the same thing Michigan is, which is slow the game down. And that was Fresno State's plan. I think, what did Michigan run? 61 plays or something like that? It wasn't
62.
very many.
It was low 60s.
Yeah, it wasn't very many. And that's just not going to be the case with Texas. And Sark wants to hit the big explosive plays, right? And again, I've seen, whether it was the Ohio State teams of 21, 22, and 23 to some extent, right? Washington, again, comes to mind. Even the TCU game, 14 of those points weren't on the defense, right? And you had multiple turnovers near the goal line. The fourth down call early in the game, the fumble with the fullback inside run to Mullings, basically, right? So I just continue to think that there were more penalties in this one than Michigan has had. Mm-hmm. But some of them were crap, right? And also you had some of the younger guys out there. And I agree, Brock, like there was nothing in the game to like encourage me to be more confident. But if it was a situation where I felt like Michigan went out there and tried a bunch of stuff and failed, if this was an execution problem, I'd probably be more nervous. And to me, it's just like I have to have faith that like they were trying to win the game while also accomplishing a bunch of other things. And there's just no way you're going to have that type of wide receiver rotation in some of those play calls. You know, at the end of the game when they needed to win it, they got on Mullings back, had a great drive, 7 yards, 75, touchdown. That was a weird thing too. In the second half, all their drives, 11 plays, 9 plays, 10 plays, but they were all for like 38 yards.
Yeah. So
they had these long drives in terms of plays and time, but they just, to Brock's point earlier, what was the longest play? 20-something yards. There was just no chunk plays at all. It was literally the 3 yards and a cloud of dust, you know? So
I do think it's interesting, Trevor, when you mention like the magic number is 30 for both sides.
It's crazy.
And look what Michigan got last week, 30 on the dot. And they won
every single time, dude.
I do believe 30 is probably going to be that number again this week. You know, I think either team, if they get to 30, I think that their chances of winning go way up. This could be a very kind of like, it could be a low, like a 27-24 type of game, just because, you know, both defenses look to be pretty good. But yeah, I mean, if you get to that 30 point, your odds of, at least for Michigan, your odds of winning it go way, way, way up. At least recently, of course.
There are 2 losses in the 3 year, well, except for Georgia, right? That's kind of its own. I mean, they gave up 30 points in that one. That was 34-11 or something weird like that. Yeah. But TCU and Michigan State both scored more than 30. And then other than, Alabama was 27-20. And then was it the Maryland game? There was another one where they didn't score 30, but Ohio State last year, 30-24. Right? Like, it's just crazy how consistent. And that's what I think this game's going to be. I think the offense barely gets to 30. You know, if I'm projecting the score, which let's go ahead and do that. You know, I want to say 31, but I think there's going to be more field goals than that. So do I go 4 touchdowns? We'll say 34. We'll give them 34, 4 touchdowns and 2 field goals. And then I think Texas will probably be 23. I think they're going to kick a bunch of field goals too.
They have a pretty good kicker too.
Yeah.
Auburn.
God, I hate picking Michigan to win by 11, though. I think it'd be closer than that. Man, I don't know. We'll go 30-27. 30-27. I think Michigan edges it out. If Texas hits some big plays, then obviously we're in a different animal. But I've seen this game before, you know. But yeah, we'll see.
I got Michigan winning 27-24. I think I don't know if they're going to get to that 30 number. And hell, at this point, I don't know if they're going to get to 27, but you know, ultimately we'll find out. But I do think it's going to be kind of a relatively low scoring game. I think if this gets to be kind of a track meet, that does not bode well for Michigan at all. It never has historically. So yeah, I got to see a lot of improvement on Saturday for sure.
I'm expecting it to be a much lower scoring game than you guys. I think if either team is even close to sniffing 30, Michigan's in trouble. I just don't have that much confidence in the offense to be able to keep up with that. I've got Michigan winning 17-14. I just think it's going to be a slow game, not a lot going on. The defenses are going to show out. I just can't see a scenario where Michigan puts up 30 or more points on Texas's defense. 2 touchdowns and a Zavada field goal, I think, will be enough. I don't until I see Michigan lose at the Big House. It's been almost 5 calendar years, by the way, since that's happened with fans in the stands. So until I see that again, I think I'm going to pick Michigan at home until further notice. So 17-14, Michigan's my prediction.
Fall season, like you said, tough to pick Michigan to score early points after what they showed yesterday. I get that, and obviously, angle you're taking, Brock. So no offense. If what they showed yesterday is what this offense is, then they're going to win 6 games this year.
Yeah.
That's just not their offense. I think not only were they trying to be vanilla, once they got through the script plays, there was just like no rhyme and reason to anything they did. It almost felt like they had a checklist of things they needed to accomplish in the game. And they're like, okay, we didn't call this kind of play yet. Do that real quick. And on that last drive, again, when they got the run game going and then the play action opened up, look at what happened there. So Warren's going to be, I know it's a tougher challenge, but I think he's going to be better just from a better game plan. Somebody brought up too, I don't know if I've had a lot of these conversations, so I apologize. Somebody brought this up to me, and I mentioned in the stock report as well. I do wonder, looking at this game, because Warren's decision, or the decision for Warren, did kind of come late in terms of like the last practice last week and some early practices this week. Some of the calls in that game made more sense to me if Orji was the quarterback, in terms of the short routes that they were doing and then taking the deep shot when they took it and not throwing the intermediate routes that Warren is really good at. Like Josh brought up, like sometimes they looked like the JJ offense. That's what they need to do with Warren. Right now, he's not going to have the 3rd and long conversion JJ had. We've talked about this a million times. It's never happening. What JJ did on 3rd and long last year was unfathomable. Right. But that's kind of the flip, and why I think it's so important. Mullings has got to get some of those carries. Was part of the reason they had a lot of 3rd and longs last year. Was as good as Blake Corum was, his yards per carry were down last year. He wasn't breaking tackles like he did in years past. He wasn't getting those extra fall forward yards, right? So I think Mullings gets you there. I do think the Orji stuff, when used at the right time, works, right? He had multiple first downs on those zone reads, whether he made the right read or whether he kept it and went up. He had some good runs. I think that can work. And then, judging the Orji on one pass, I think it was Seth at MGoBlog said it. I don't remember, but he made a good point. It's not that means Orji can't throw and he only throws bad passes. I think that was a better sign of the issue, which was the inconsistency.
Yeah.
I bet they could have run that play 5 times, and on 3 of them, he connects on it. And then on one of them, he throws it in the ground like that. And who knows on the other one, right? Yeah. That was more the issue. But they showed they're willing to let him throw it. And I think that's important, because you don't want to put him out there. Everyone's like, well, he's going to run it, obviously. Because then that defeats the whole purpose. We talked about that with like the Jabril Peppers packages and stuff like that too. But
yeah, I want to respond to a comment here. I don't think anyone is judging Orji on one pass, but I think it kind of goes with the fact that he's been inconsistent in camp, and that's been his biggest downfall.
Yeah.
If he didn't have inconsistency issues, he would be the starting quarterback. He lost that. He had the job until about a week and a half ago.
Yeah.
Because of his inconsistency issues and because of the turnover problems. So I don't think anyone's judging Orji on one pass. I don't think the coaches put either quarterback in a position to be successful. Right. So I don't think anyone
stinks, because Orji had the touchdown, which again we talked about earlier, was a great call, really good play call.
Yeah,
but those were the only 2 times he got to throw it. So we're still in a position where we just really don't have a lot of information. Where Warren, we can't judge Warren on the whole game. Again, his adjusted completion percentage when you factor in drops was 80%.
Yeah.
He did, I think, with what they asked him to do and what gave him to do, I think he did pretty well. I do think, again, he was throwing the ball too quickly. He wasn't going through progressions and locking on reads after the pick, after the sack. He definitely was trying to get the ball out as quick as he possibly could, and they didn't seem to adjust to that for him. And then when they did bring in the extra offensive lineman, when they did run play action, it was successful.
Yep.
So put your players in position to succeed. So,
yep. I would say really quick, the fact that we're talking about Orgy's inconsistency, if he was in there and threw 2 passes and one of them was rolled to Tyler Morris there on the outside, it must be pretty concerning for the staff that, he's got 2 chances and one of them he bounces, right? It's not like, he is. I don't know how I'm trying to say what I'm saying, but he didn't have that many chances, and he blew one of the 2 that he did. So it must be a pretty big concern.
I said this actually. Waddy, my buddy Waddy, said it to me first on that screen on 3rd and 10. I'd rather you run it. I'm so sick of that play.
Yeah.
I'm so sick of the bubble screen without the O-line releasing and to the short side of the field or without an extra blocker. I just don't get it. You're asking so much of your players there, where it's like Morris and Morgan. Let's see some slants. Let's see some drag routes.
Yeah, I think Borge Warner nailed it here. The offense needs to be better no matter who the quarterback is. Yeah, I agree. It's not a quarterback issue. It's an offense issue. And it's week 1. It's like, if this is when you start to see trends, excuse me, I'm struggling right now. When you start to see trends, that's when it's concerning. I'm not going to write off this offense after 1 week. I know some folks wrote off the offense last year because of 1 week. I mean, I'm not
because of 3. More than 3.
I'm not comparing the 2 here, but we've been pretty open in saying like, hey, this offense is going to take a little bit of time to catch up to where the defense is. I mean, the defense was kind of ready to go for a while here. And so the offense, there's going to be a little bit of a lag period where the offense needs to catch up. And the staff isn't stupid. They're not dumb people. They understand what's
that is
going
a good
on.
Reminder. They do know better than us.
They need a lot of money. They know more football than I will ever know in my entire lifetime. So, and they've been around, Kirk Campbell's been around. Sherrone Moore, obviously, been around. Like they've seen progressions. They've seen things like this before. So it's not like this is uncharted territory. And so I think we'll have a lot more to talk about, obviously, after next week, to kind of see where things are at. Yeah. Even if they do lose and there's improvement on offense, it's there's still you like to see progress. So
that's kind of
never mind. I'm not even going to get into it. Yeah. I'm not even going to get into it. There's some dumbass comments out there.
The funny thing about this Texas game and us having to adjust the way we think about college football, they're really playing with house money here in the sense that if they win, I've said this, I think this is a very important game for them because if they win, it's a fire starter for the rest of their season. They're very easily undefeated going to Oregon and then potentially undefeated or 1 loss when they go to Ohio State. Winning this game is massive. Mm-hmm. However, losing it, we saw even with the 4-team playoff last year, Alabama, and how they were able to overcome a home loss to Texas, but especially with the expanded playoff and the fact that Texas is not in your conference. If Michigan loses this game by no more than 10 points, it will be just as valuable as a win against a really bad non-conference opponent. The way the committee looks at this, like you lost to a top 5 team, the way their strength of schedule. Now it makes your other games more important, right? You can't drop USC or Washington, and you want to hopefully pick off an Oregon or Ohio State. So you're not 9-3 and your biggest wins are USC and Washington. But it's just, this isn't ending your season if you lose the game, where in years past, it literally lost your season, right? So
this is just dumb. This is just dumb. This is just dumb. Yeah, and guess what? Their asses got fired. So, I would welcome these people to go ahead and make a choice at quarterback and then see how well that works out for them.
I
Tell
understand.
me anyone on this staff is comparable to Don Brown and Matt Weiss. And if you say Wink Martindale, you're a freaking moron. So but
here's
Jesus, people.
Here's the other opposite. Here's the other side of this. The coaches weren't going against us; they were going against other elite coaches and got out coached. Like, that happens sometimes. You know what I mean? Like, that's part of it. Like, yeah. Just like in the NBA, if I played an NBA player, I love the Brian Scalabrine thing. Have you seen that, where he played the high schooler that was talking shit to him at a gym?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. You haven't seen it? Okay. So the whole thing was, Brian Scalabrine is analytically the worst player in the NBA at the time this is going on. The worst player in the NBA. And there's a high schooler there who's being recruited by colleges. He's kind of talking crap about him. And they go one-on-one. I don't remember if it was till 21 or whatever, but the high schooler didn't score, and Scalabrine absolutely whooped his butt. And what he said when they got done was, I am way closer to LeBron James than you are to me.
It's true. It's fact.
It's true.
Yeah.
And that was like this kind of mind-boggling, like, whoa, when you're the 1% of the 1% of the 1%, like, you've gotten to that level, right? So in college football, right, when you're a coach, you can be unbelievable on the whole way. These guys have every player out there has been the best athlete and the big man on campus at their school. And now they're surrounded by a bunch of people that are just like them. And frankly, that's what Sharon Moore and Kurt Campbell are going to have to prove here.
Yeah, no, realistically, they just need to fire everyone. That's what needs to happen. Clearly, just throw away the season, fire everyone on the coaching staff. They're screwed.
I'll give you this. I think this is fair. Matt Weiss is recruiting versus Kurt Campbell. Yeah, definitely.
Guess what? His ass got fired.
Yeah. Although I don't know if Dante Moore was here, if it'd be that big of a difference, given how.
I don't think they'd get either Dante Moore or
even if it was somebody different. Yeah.
Yeah. So look, I mean, whatever. Look, in the whole transfer portal argument too. Why did Michigan get a quarterback out of the portal? Well, first off, you didn't know what the hell Jim Harbaugh was doing. Mm-hmm. I don't think Jim Harbaugh knew what he was doing. JJ, was waiting for Harbaugh to make a decision, and ended up.
He wasn't going to announce it. I had this conversation with somebody in a Twitter space that was like, well, he could have still said behind the scenes or whatever. Like, to this day, the fan base crucifies Cade McNamara for how he handled his transfer situation. He was never going to start at Michigan again. He was injured. The portal was open, and he went to Iowa in the midst of the Big Ten championship game. Can you imagine if J.J. McCarthy, around the Big Ten championship game, and Michigan's going to the playoff and the number one team, announced he's going to the NFL draft?
Yeah.
What people would have said, like, how selfish, why are you doing this? And
that,
you're focused on that and not the team, right? The optics of
the optics too.
Would have been terrible.
You're recruiting Cade McNamara while you're on a champ, or excuse me, I was reading a comment. You're recruiting Dante Moore while you're in the middle of a championship run, while you still have JJ. It looks like you're kicking him out the door. It's optics too.
And like, nobody was committing to Michigan until they knew what Jim Harbaugh was doing.
Right.
So even if there's this hypothetical situation where you could have gotten a quarterback, they're not going until that stuff was resolved. And hey, the negative of playing in a national championship game is you had 1 week until the deadline when the season ended, and then nobody jumped in the spring window, and it is what it is. As far as, like JJ's successor, Davis Warren was long thought to be. I mean, people forget he was QB2 in 2022. He was supposed to be the backup last year and had a shoulder injury. And I do believe the staff felt good about what they had with the potential of Orji and his athletic ability and what his ceiling could be. And Warren played well throughout spring, summer, into fall, takes the job. I'm also just not ready for this hindsight thing that everybody's ready to do in week one after a game against Fresno State. I'm not ready for it. I'd like to let the season play out a little bit. And it sucks. If JJ was back, it's a natty contender, right? But there's a lot of teams where if you put a top 10 pick at quarterback on their roster, they become a natty contender, right? So when Georgia had JT Daniels fail and they put in a walk-on Stetson Bennett, who went on to win. I'm not saying that he's Stetson.
Yeah, look,
I'm not saying that. I'm just saying there's plenty of scenarios where it's
you're talking about a five-star
other,
getting benched for a walk-on. I mean, it happens. Sometimes 5 stars don't work out either. So it's not an exact science, which goes to football. Is like, you can, us three can sit here and talk about what's best for Michigan. We have no idea what we're talking about when it compares to the Michigan football staff's knowledge and what they've seen from this team. So look, it's their job moving forward
that's an interesting point about the anxiety, because we've had so much unknown all summer, and now the only known we have is this very vanilla, discombobulated first game, which again, I'm begging you people, go back and watch the highlights from the last 3 years. There's been so many games like this where everybody was pissed on Sunday and Monday. This is not new.
No.
That was a very Harbaugh-esque game too, by the way.
God, was it? Yeah.
I mean, that was not like anything's drastically changed from the past.
That's the one thing I'm sorry about, like not wanting to show anything, blah, blah, blah. They can watch 3 years of film.
Yeah.
You're not deviating far from what you've been. And the head coach, Sharon Moore, was the architect of the offensive line, was the OC last year, has already talked about smash. Your OC was the pass game coordinator and quarterback coach. Like, nobody thinks you're going to show something unbelievable that hasn't been done by your team before.
Right. Everyone knows what you are.
Just go out and play your game, man, and win your way. Like, they're not going to be like, oh, did you see that on tape? You're going to do the same thing you've been doing for 3 years. You're not fooling anybody. You know? Right. But anyway. All right. So did you pick Michigan to win, but just a really low score, Brock? You said 17-14, right?
Yeah, Michigan 17-14.
Yeah. I'm going to be interested. Again, the betting right now is completely based on on casual bettors reacting to this weekend. So I'll be interested to see what happens when they get closer to game time. Obviously it's a big noon game. We'll see what the weather's like. And
that's another factor too.
Yeah. But at the end of the day, I am excited that Texas is coming. That you're going to have Texas against Michigan in the Big House. I think that's a really good thing for college football. And I know there's folks out there would rather play nobodies and take the wins every week. But if the one good thing we get out of the expansion or whatever is this, more games like this, Michigan goes to Oklahoma next year. I'm for it, man. I think it's cool. So, all right. Last thing real quick. If you want to do offense and defense, that's fine. But keys to the game, X factors, who has the biggest games? If Michigan beats Texas, it's because of who?
Chloe Mullings.
Hold on real quick. They don't reward strength of schedule. Are you crazy? Have you seen the playoffs the last however many years with the committee?
Yeah. Alabama.
Yeah, Alabama literally last year. Yeah, anyway, go ahead.
I think Kalel Mullings, Donovan Edwards, and whoever else is getting in the rush. I guess you could throw Alex Orji in there too. I think Michigan.
All three.
Yeah, I think Michigan wins because of the running game. I think they have to. You have to establish the line of scrimmage. You have to control the clock. The running game is going to be the thing that wins or loses this game. And right now, Michigan has that advantage in a major, major way over Texas because they just don't have a proven running back yet because everyone else is hurt. So,
Sounds of Nature picks the offensive line. The whole
yeah, I
offensive
mean,
line.
you can lump that all together as in the running game too. The offensive line, is part of the running game, of course. So,
Yeah, running game, trench play.
yeah, it's going to be won or lost in the trenches. It's so many times we've heard that over the years in Michigan's big games. You got to win in the trenches, and they have the dudes to do it. I mean, this is not like Michigan is void of talent heading into this game. I think they have some really good offensive linemen, and obviously have some very good defensive linemen. So, yeah, I think, and if the weather, I know Sam's mentioned it here in the comments, the forecast being rainy on Friday and some rain in the morning. And, if this is a wet game, I think this kind of, turns into Michigan's favor of being able to control the line of scrimmage. But you got to prove it. You got to prove it. That's the only way to do it. And I think if Michigan, it shows at least an improved running game next week, I think that calms a lot of nerves for some folks. Obviously winning will do it. We'll do a lot of it, but yeah, it all comes down to the running game.
Yep, I'm going with the offensive line. It's got to be a little bit better than it was yesterday if Michigan wants to win. Obviously, it did get better as the game went on with that 7-play, 75-yard drive that I think Mullings had 6 carries on, and then they hit Loveland over the middle for the touchdown. But there were a few plays where it seemed there was some miscommunication between Giovanni El-Hadi and Dom Jadis, and I don't think that's going to be able to fly. And there was that one play too where El-Hadi got beat pretty bad and was left in his tracks as the defensive tackle got right by him. But I just think they'll need to be a little bit better getting push and smashing, as Sharon Moore likes to say.
Yeah, I'm going to pick specifically the big game player of the last few years, Donovan Edwards.
Yeah.
I mean, whether it was the Penn State game a couple of years where it was him and Corum, Big Ten championship games, Ohio State games, national championship, like the dude shows up in big games, and he's been the difference maker in between what makes a potentially close game not. I don't know when it'll happen, but I feel like it needs to. He's got to have at least one, maybe two, just game breaker runs that, to your point earlier, Brock, if anything, at least moves the field position. Whether he scores or not, I mean, obviously, hopefully a long touchdown run and you're getting some big plays, but they just can't do the 3 yards in a cloud of dust every single time. There's got to be at least a few chunk plays in there. And I'll go defensive tackles on the other side. I think I know what there is with the edge rushers, and I expect them to play really well. Graham and Grant were dominant at times, but I was surprised neither one generated a pressure in this game against Fresno State. And we talked about at the beginning of the year whether Mason Graham is arguably your best pass rusher, right? To the people that are anxious about that cover zero play or the idea that, Wink might blitz too much. The easiest medicine for that is if Moore, Grant, Graham, and Stewart, if they're creating pressure consistently with that front four, and he'll still send Barham, and he's still going to send Barry, and he's still going to send dudes, right? But I think it's going to be that those defensive tackles have to be the absolute difference makers that we thought they were going to be. So, all right. Obviously,
I do think Crippen should be the starting center, though. That's just my opinion.
It was interesting. That was my gut watching it, but I think a lot of people don't realize, like, Jadis came back in for the second half. Crippen only played like 10 snaps.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
So I think there's this perception that, like, the offensive line was so much better when he was out there, but he wasn't actually out there as long as a lot of people think. But no, I know. The reason we've talked about this so many times, Evan Link was a highly ranked redshirt freshman who beat out 2 older players, but haven't had crazy tons of hype over the last couple of years. Gentry has a bunch of hype because he was also a highly rated recruit 4 or 5 years ago. right? But these guys, it's not like you beat El Hadi out, somebody who's played and been on the field a bunch. I know Percy had the start, whatever, but he was also a highly rated recruit. Like, okay, I like that. Cool. We've heard so much hype about Crippen for 2 years.
Yeah.
And how much throughout this era of Michigan football, it's been like, we've heard it with Mullings and how, he learned from blah, 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 and following his leads, Samaj Morgan, following Roman Wilson, people following, Mikey Sainer still. He was behind in learning from Olu and Nugent for the last 2 years. I don't get it.
Well, I
not
do
a knock on him or Jadis, but like,
I do think part of it,
that one's weird to me.
Crippen was banged up in camp for a couple of days during a crucial part of camp. Nothing serious, obviously, because he played, but I think that Jadis was available throughout camp, and I think that was kind of the big. If you're looking at performance level and you see that it's basically the same with all three guys, you look at who has been the most available, and Jadis was there.
We were seeing some practice clips where they were getting, and then we had some intel that went along with it, where they were getting really creative on the offensive line. And that's actually when they had a couple guys injured, that's what opened the door for Jadis and Link, who had been performing well as the backup left tackle. They're like, hey, we got to get him involved at right. It was injuries that opened the door. So,
yeah. So, I mean, we'll see ultimately if anything changes, but I don't expect changes on the offensive line. I still think Jadis will start at center, but I guess having Crippen as a backup is not a bad thing, I guess. But
yeah, and that's the best part about him and Link winning the job is, Gentry is a backup now, a guy that played all four positions last year. It's not a bad thing from a depth standpoint. Right. So, All right. Michigan.rivals.com is already loaded with tons of post-game content. Obviously, Brock was at the game, has things posted up, and we've gone through all of the press conferences, transcribed, and information from that. We have some premium content up as well if you're interested in, snap counts or analysis or anything like that. Monday, we pick up right again. Press conferences begin. We'll have more content throughout the week, of course, covering anything that comes out of the coaches, any intel moving forward into the Texas game. So if you're not a subscriber already, please, Michigan.rivals.com. Head over, join our community, be a part of the den. You can be in there with just what we think is just an awesome community message board full of awesome people. Good chunk of them here joining us every single week on Hail to the Podcast in the comment section. Again, as always, if you're listening to this back on playback, make sure you're heading over to YouTube, liking, subscribing, getting notification bell so you can join us when we go live. Not just us, but Dennis with Good Afternoon Michigan Football during the week, our betting show, Sharpening the Edge on Friday, post-game live at the end of every single Michigan game. Dennis goes live. We've got tons and tons of content here on YouTube as well, of course, at Michigan.rivals.com. So hope to see you over there. Otherwise, we'll be back in a week. Sunday at 7, Hail to the Podcast, talking Michigan versus Texas. We'll see you soon.